Hello? Hola? Hello? Okay. Welcome, everyone. We are here to celebrate in occasion of the Sharing City Summit. First, we are going to present the declaration that yesterday ended up with the 50 cities participating in the Sharing City Summit, with Deputy Mayor Gerardo Pisarello from Barcelona, Deputy Mayor Udo Kock from Amsterdam, and Vice Mayor Cristina Tajani from Milan. After the presentation of the declaration, we will make a picture with all the cities that has support the elaboration of the declaration. And after this first part, regarding the presentation of the declaration, we will have the panel on debate on the sharing and inclusive cities, with the intervention of Cristina Tajani, Vice Mayor of Milan, Carlos Moreno, Senior Advisor of Paris, Christina Gould, and Udo Kock, Vice Mayor from Amsterdam. And Tom Shareable will introduce also part of Shareable work. After this debate, we will move into a coffee break for networking, and we will have two keynotes, one from Juliet Schor from Boston College, and another one from Mark Graham from Internet Institute. So we can start?
Yes. Just a short introduction in Catalan, also because we have a lot of local media and local participants. Benvinguts, benvingudes, gràcies per assistir a la presentació de la declaració. Com sabeu, ahir vam tenir una jornada molt intensa al D-Hub de Barcelona, el Design Hub de Barcelona i al Mediatic, on 50 ciutats vam estar treballant bastant intensament en com generar col·laboracions entre ciutats per fer front a l'economia de plataforma i a l'economia col·laborativa. Des d'aquesta doble perspectiva de que tenim tant oportunitats com reptes i que les ciutats hem de tenir una veu a fer sentit tant davant de les plataformes com davant d'institucions internacionals que finalment generen els marcs legislatius on aquesta economia es desenvolupa. I just want to thank again all the cities that were doing a very intense working day yesterday. It was a very long day, we know that. We asked you for a very big effort, but I think it was worthy to put all this energy. And I think today this declaration is a kind of a result of this work of not just yesterday, but the last 2 years that started in Amsterdam in 2016, continuing last year in New York, and then this year in Barcelona. So I just want to say very briefly the cities that has confirmed their support, and other cities are finishing their internal process in their city halls. A Coruña, Amsterdam, Atenas, Athens, Atlanta, Barcelona, Bethlehem, Bologna, Burdeos, Buenos Aires, Göteborg, Grenoble, Kobe, Lisbon, Madrid, Milan, Montreal, Montreux, New York City, Paris, Reykjavik, San Francisco, Santiago de Compostela, Sao Paulo, Seúl, Taipei, Torino, Toronto, Umeå, Valencia, Vienna, Vitoria, and Den Haag. And there's a few cities that are still in their process. So thank you to all of these cities for this support. And I invite to come up to the stage Deputy Mayor Gerardo Pisarello, Udo Kock from Amsterdam, Deputy Mayor from Amsterdam, and Vice Mayor Cristina Tajani from Milan. So we didn't want to make a very long presentation, so we have asked the representation of 3 of the main cities that has been working on this process. Amsterdam as the first city that starts with the Sharing City Summit process, Barcelona as the hosting city of this year, and Milan, who's been one of the cities very involved in all this process, to make a brief declaration on what is the perspective they have of this document that we are approving today. And after that, as Mayo explained, we will ask the cities to come up to the stage, and we will get at this group picture. So please, Gerardo Pisarello, Vice Mayor of Barcelona.
Well, thank you very much, Deputy Mayor of Amsterdam, Mr. Udo Kock, assessore a politica del lavoro, attività produttive, commercio e risorse umane del Comune di Milano, signora Cristina Tajani, representatives of all the cities, friends. It's really a pleasure to close this meeting. I had the opportunity to be in the beginning of the sessions yesterday. And Barcelona, as a city, is really proud to host such an important meeting, which I think will be crucial for the future of urban reality, not only in our cities, but in the whole world. I especially want to give my thanks to the cities of Amsterdam and New York, which precede us in organizing this event. Now, as we have local press, I will switch to Catalan to make some statements about these conclusions. Com s'acaba d'explicar, avui som aquí 42 ciutats de tot el món per presentar públicament aquesta declaració de principis i compromisos per ciutats col·laboratives que sorgeix d'aquesta cimera. L'objectiu bàsic d'aquesta declaració és fer sentir la veu de les ciutats que treballem plegades per aprofitar les oportunitats d'innovació que impliquen les plataformes digitals i la revolució tecnològica que s'està produint i al mateix temps per regular i establir regles de joc clares quan aquestes plataformes puguin tenir un impacte negatiu, diguem-ne, a la ciutat o per evitar, en realitat, que aquests impactes negatius es produeixin a la ciutat. La declaració, que parteix dels treballs fets a les anteriors cimeres de New York i Amsterdam, fixa 10 principis que parlen precisament de les oportunitats que ens dona l'economia digital per promoure un creixement econòmic sostenible i al servei de les persones. I parla també d'un seguit de principis en matèria de drets dels usuaris, en matèria de drets laborals, en matèria de transparència, per prevenir possibles impactes negatius que aquestes plataformes puguin arribar a tenir. No és casualitat que Barcelona lideri aquesta trobada i no és casualitat perquè l'impacte que tenen aquestes activitats normalment es manifesten en primer lloc a les ciutats. Malgrat que no sempre som les ciutats les que tenim les eines per poder afrontar aquests fenòmens, que són fenòmens globals, perquè impliquen moltes vegades actors que són globals i transnacionals, és en les ciutats on es produeix el principal impacte d'aquestes actuacions. Nosaltres ho hem dit moltes vegades, el món de les plataformes digitals és un món enormement variat, és un món enormement plural, amb experiències molt diverses, i el gran repte, com dèiem abans, que tenim com a ciutats és promoure tots aquells models col·laboratius que ens permetin millorar la vida a les ciutats, i n'hi ha molts, i a Barcelona en tenim molts exemples, i alhora poder ser molt fermes a l'hora d'establir regles de joc clares i regulacions quan aquests models puguin tenir-ne un impacte negatiu. En el cas de Barcelona, Barcelona és una ciutat que s'ha caracteritzat per les dues coses. Estem molt orgulloses de ser una ciutat que té moltíssimes iniciatives de plataformes digitals col·laboratives en sectors com la mobilitat, en sectors de provisió de serveis, etc. I també som una ciutat que hem sigut ferms i a l'hora d'intentar regular l'impacte negatiu d'algunes d'aquestes plataformes. Per exemple, estem treballant des de fa temps conjuntament amb grans plataformes com Airbnb o com a Uber, precisament per poder treballar plegats i evitar que l'actuació d'aquestes plataformes pugui perjudicar, per exemple, l'exercici del dret a l'habitatge a la ciutat o que pugui comportar una competència deslleial amb altres sectors públics que operen a la ciutat. Però ja dic, el nostre objectiu és poder desenvolupar una estratègia conjunta entre diverses ciutats per poder entomar aquests fenòmens. Entenem que són fenòmens globals, però que només es poden afrontar de manera global a través de la cooperació entre les ciutats. Hi ha dos principis que per nosaltres són importants d'aquestes declaracions, tots ells ho són, però hi ha dos en els que jo voldria posar èmfasi. Un primer és reivindicar la sobirania de les ciutats per poder intervenir en aquestes qüestions. Com dèiem abans, les ciutats estem en la primera línia de relació amb la ciutadania i són les primeres que rebem tots els impactes, positius i no tan positius, de les plataformes digitals. Nosaltres ens agradaria que aquests principis que aprovem avui aquí fossin reconeguts per la Unió Europea i fossin reconeguts a nivell internacional, perquè creiem que ho necessitem. Però mentrestant, el que reclamem és que les ciutats tinguin elements per poder establir regles de joc clares sobre aquests fenòmens. És a dir, que mentre no tinguem aquests principis reconeguts a àmbits superiors, com poden ser la Unió Europea, ens deixin fer i ens deixin poder establir les nostres regles de joc. I per tant, l'objectiu d'aquesta reunió en realitat és poder seguir treballant de manera coordinada i també fer lobby, per què no dir-ho, entre les ciutats per aconseguir que aquests canvis, el que es recullen en aquests principis, poden arribar a instàncies superiors. Des d'aquest punt de vista, ho hem dit en més d'una ocasió, el que volem fer és practicar una mena de sindicalisme municipalista en defensa de les economies realment col·laboratives, que és el que necessitem en un context com el que estem vivint. De la mateixa manera que des de Barcelona hem promogut aliances per lluitar contra la contaminació i per entomar el repte del canvi climàtic i tenir ciutats més habitables, de la mateixa manera que hem promogut aliances per lluitar contra la gentrificació, l'especulació i protegir el dret a l'habitatge, avui ens conjurem 42 ciutats per defensar les oportunitats que planteja l'economia col·laborativa i per poder establir regles de joc clara que impedeixin que aquest tipus d'iniciatives tingui un impacte negatiu en les nostres ciutats. Per tant, amb molt d'orgull, recollim el testimoni d'Amsterdam i de New York i agraïm molt a totes les ciutats que han fet possible aquesta trobada. Gràcies.
Thank you, primer tinent Gerardo Pisarello. I want to thank the international community for your understanding that we are doing part of the presentation in Catalan for the local media and the local participants. So now I'm going to give the word to Deputy Mayor Udo Kock from Amsterdam. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Geraldo. Thank you for your kind words. That is, I assume they were kind words. I couldn't understand them because it was all in Catalan, I think. But thank you anyway. It's an honor for me to be here, especially since Amsterdam hosted the first Sharing City Summit 2 years ago. And when I look at this audience and look at the program that we had yesterday and all the discussions, I think the summit and the movement sort of has come a long way. It was fairly small scale 2 years ago, and now it has grown into a very substantive group of cities that is trying to solve very complex issues. So I think that's a great achievement, and thank you for that. Just a few remarks on what I've seen and heard of the last day and a half. I think this alliance of cities that is thinking about the sharing economy, there are a few perspectives, and there are a few perspectives that are always heard. It's the perspective of the workers, which is important because at the end of the day, a lot of these new platforms and economic initiatives, these disruptive activities, some way they're threatening for workers. And it's our job as governments, as local governments and national governments, to address that, to protect these people when necessary, and to take their interest into account. There's the perspective of us cities. I mean, we have to deal with all of these issues, but we're not always given the tools, the legal means, the policy tools to actually address those issues. So what we are doing, including in the context of this alliance, is to lobby our national governments, to lobby the European Commission to at least give us the policy means and the legal tools that we need to address some of the challenges that we're faced with. The other perspective, which is sometimes, I wouldn't say marginalized, but which maybe could get a little bit more attention, I think, is the perspective of consumers. Because at the end of the day, companies entering these markets and these disruptive businesses, at the end of the day, their objective is to make a profit. That's fine, but their objective is also to provide good new services for consumers. And that perspective is important. And I think in the sometimes heated political debate about the virtues of this sharing economy, it's part of our job as cities to keep that consumer perspective to take that into account. The other perspective is the perspective of these new businesses, these new companies entering these markets, these disruptive companies. They sometimes feel that they're being, regulated, over-regulated. Some of them actually ask me, are we welcome in your city? Are we welcome? And my answer is always, yes, you are, provided that you stick to the rules. And by the way, we set the rules, you don't. That's our job. And provided that your activity truly adds value for the city and for the community and for our citizens. But you are welcome, and I think that's important to stress. At the end of the day, as I've said before, it's a big challenge for us cities to strike the right balance between innovation and regulation. If you over-regulate, you kill innovation. If you don't regulate, you might get the innovation that you don't want. You get harmful innovation. So it's a big challenge to strike that balance. And I think that this summit and this alliance really helps us because the issues are so complex, so difficult. How do you deal with Airbnb? How do you deal with Uber? How do you deal with companies that have so many legal means? How do you deal with companies that always try to find a way around the rules sometimes, which is just the truth? The challenges are so huge that we cities must learn from each other, and Amsterdam has learned a lot from the other cities in this alliance. We on a weekly basis we use the knowledge in this alliance. And we will continue to do so. I very much look forward to next year's summit. I have my own personal wish list of where that summit could take place. I wouldn't mind if it's in Barcelona again, but that's probably not going to happen. But again, thank you very much for your leadership, for organizing this, and thank you for your contributions.
Thank you. And last but not least, Deputy Mayor from Milan, Cristina Tajani.
Good morning. I'm very pleased to be here today, and I really want to thank Mr. Gerardo Pisariello, my colleague, for hosting us and for the perfect organization of this meeting. We believe that the declaration we are presenting today is just a first step of a long path we will run together in the next year. And according with the final declaration, let me put a particular emphasis of the principle related to work and workers' rights in the digital economy. We believe that cities must contribute to building conditions for those workers in digital platform, in digital economy, to be guaranteed in terms of wages, safety, security, and also social security, social protection. We believe that digital platform must be a key factor of dynamism or of economic development in our cities and not a precarious one. And finally, let me say that I believe that our common action could also suggest regulations, indications, public policies to the government level, national government level. And our presence here is also to assure at our network continuity in our common path, because we think that cities today together can do more than in some case national states. So thank you for your cooperation, for your commitment. Thank you.
So thank you very much. So just before we ask you to come to the stage for the group picture, I want to also thank FIRA Barcelona and Smart City Expo and Smart City Congress for the collaboration in the organization of the Sharing City Summit, and also the Universitat Oberta de Catalunya, especially the Demons Research Group that is being absolutely necessary for the organization of all this summit. So yes, please, I want to thank both of you. And I will ask Mayo Fuster, the director of the Demons Research Group, to explain you just very briefly what is going to be happening here in this room for the next days, and also in the Sharing Pavilion within the Sharing Smart City Expo. And then after we will ask you to come up to the stage.
Thank you. So as Cristina Tajani has pointed out, today is not the end, but is the starting of a long way. And actually, as part of the Smart City Congress this year, the Sharing City Summit is happening here through the topic on inclusive and sharing cities, which we are in the room, where activities will happen. As I explained previously, following this event, we are going to have a panel between several representatives from cities and then keynotes. And this afternoon and on the following days, there is going to be always activities here linked to the Sharing City Summit. In the plenary sessions and the auditorium, we are going to have also keynotes like Yunus or Yochai Benkler joining us. Beyond the Congress itself, I would like to encourage you to visit the sharing stand, because this year at the Expo there is a sharing stand very close to the City Council one, with 80 actors being exposed, and with our own Agora program with activities during the 3 days. I would like to point out about the innovative character of this year's summit in terms of incorporating not only an encounter between city councils as it happened today, but also being part of a public congress like this one, and engaging platforms which are socially responsible, research, and also civil society through the stand. Even if all this very intense program and many occasions that you will have to inject with the declaration and inject with the activities linked to the Sharing City Summit of this year, to point out that the declaration has a part which is a task force of common actions to be followed during the coming year until the next summit to support the agreements. So this is, as Cristina has said, just the start. Hope you have a lot of fun in the activities.
So thank you very much. So now we ask one person in representation of each of the cities that are present to come up to the stage. We will all stand. There's not a very concrete protocol order, so Philippe and some of this will help us to position ourselves for the picture. So please, you can.
Hello everyone. Good morning. Yes. Please join the. We are going to start the thematic program on inclusive and sharing cities of this edition of the Smart City Congress. The inclusive and sharing cities topic, which is one of the 5 topics of the Smart City Congress of this year, it happened in occasion of the celebration of the Sharing Cities Summit, which is a summit that has joined 50 cities and has take place yesterday, and it's also part of the Congress of this year. The encounter between the cities has ended up into a common declaration of principles to refer to which is what a sharing city should be in terms of how far the incorporation of platform economy should be in equilibrium with a set of principles, which the cities want to make sure they are present in their cities and assume a common commitments. The approach is that of referring to and addressing the challenges and opportunities of cities regarding platform economy. Collaborative modalities of production has emerged with the adoption of new technologies, forms of production between communities of people which are spread but supported through a digital platform emerged with the internet, first with the case of open source and free software kind of projects, then we get the case of Wikipedia, and we have been seeing how far this modality of production of collaborative engagement of communities of people supported by a digital platform has been expanded through actually almost all area of activity. Here in Barcelona, as part of the Open University of Catalonia, which I am part of, we did a study 2 years ago about which are the areas of activity which collaborative production is present, and we identified 14. We replicate the study this year, and we identified 32 areas of activity. Only in 2 years, there has been a double ambits of activity which you can find collaborative production. And we have seen how far from the more immaterial kind of activities, more the production of software or the production of online content, we have seen also to the move into the open design, the production also of cars, or the management of collaboratively management of public spaces, but also the collaborative taking care of kids through being supported by digital platforms. So this is not a sector, it's not only an ambit, it's a mode of production very ubiquitous that might arrive almost to any kind of ambit of activity. The cities are concentrating this activity, and most of this impact happening in cities, and it's creating both challenges because the disruptive impact of some of the models like Airbnb, Uber, or Glovo, but also are creating opportunities because there is also modalities of collaborative production that are socially responsive, like for example the case of Some Mobilitat, Moodle, or Wikiloc, in which we are seeing the collaborative production being injected into a responsible model in a scale that we didn't have seen before. An important element in order to address this ambit is to be able to actually have criteria of differentiation. What is actually different from, if I move, you listen to me too? Okay. What are the criteria of differentiation of these different modalities? In this regard, in the Open University of Catalonia, with Demons, a research group that I direct, we have developed a study in order to see which criteria can differentiate the platforms. And we have, the study has been documented into this book that has been published in occasion of the summit. And on the basis of an analysis of a sample of 100 cases, we identified that the elements that differentiate the different modalities of platforms has to do with criteria of if they are peer-to-peer, and there are peer-to-peer engagements in contrast to business-to-business kind of mode of interaction. If they are a collaborative governance, or it's a governance that does not involve the users of the community. It's very different, the type of governance of something like Wikipedia in contrast to something like Uber, to put an example. The type of technological policies, if they are based on open data or if they are based on open software, they provide more freedoms to the users of these platforms. But also it's important to consider which are the impacts and how far they are responsible with their, the impact they generate, considering environmental issues, inclusive issues, and also the responsibility regarding the respectful regarding the local regulations. So these elements of the importance of differentiating models, not because one is bad or another ones are good, but in order to treat also differently from a policy perspective, depending on which is their character, if it's more pro-social or more socially responsible, that is, than in contrast to those models that might be more aggressive or the predators of dynamics in the city. Again, the Sharing City Summit of yesterday, and 50 cities end up in this declaration of principles about how to address commonly between the cities these common challenges and opportunities and this common view. We are lucky today that we have with us 3 of the cities that inject with the Sharing City Summit declaration, and also Tom Levermont from Shareable. First, we will have an intervention from Udo Kock, which is the Deputy Mayor from Amsterdam, which was the first city hosting the Sharing City Summit. Then we will have an intervention from Carlos Moreno, which is a senior advisor of Cristina Antoinette Gould, which is vice mayor of Paris, and we will have an intervention from Cristina Tajani, deputy mayor from Milan. I would like first to give the floor to Udo Kock. Thank you. No, as you prefer.
Does this work? Very good, thank you. Sorry, I was juggling around a little bit with my glasses and the microphone and the headset, but I think I'm all set now. I think, you know, local governments, when we think about the sharing economy and the issues involved, we usually find ourselves, and me as a deputy mayor, I find myself almost constantly dealing with sort of the negative side aspects of this sharing economy, or as economists would say, the negative external effects. And also, a lot of what we've discussed over the last day and a half was about the negative side effects, or the potentially negative side effects on workers, and on social cohesion, and on what it does for the environment, etc., etc., etc. And I think that's good. I mean, my job and our job as local governments is dealing with negative effects of all sorts. But I think it's important to keep in mind that this sharing economy and these initiatives also have a lot of positive effects. It's actually in many ways a great thing, not just from an innovation perspective, but also what I would like to call from a social inclusion perspective. And let me just, I want to use this intervention to give one small example of that. It's a little project that we did in Amsterdam. What it is that we, one of the platforms that we have in Amsterdam is this meal sharing platform, or cook at home. I think you have it in many cities, in many countries. It's basically that residents in a specific neighborhood, they cook meals in their own homes, they put it online, and then you can buy that meal and they deliver it at your house, or you can just pick it up. Small scale, very cheap, and it's a nice way for people who like to cook and who cook well to sort of make some extra money and sort of develop that little business. And the platform is basically used to bring supply and demand together. We've used this platform to see if we could sort of integrate people with low incomes who are not very well sort of digitally educated, where people that face the sort of digital gap, that don't use the internet a lot, that don't have an iPad, to sort of bring them into that platform. What we did as a city government is we basically gave a huge subsidy for people that have a city pass. A city pass is basically a discount card that everybody receives who has a low income, or retired people get it. And you get discounts on everything, like museums and sports facilities. But we gave people that have this city card a €5 discount on a €6 meal through this cook at home or home cooking platform. Now, obviously, it was a success, because if you tell Dutch people, look, you get an 80% discount on something, it will work. So that was not a surprise. But the nice thing is that when the project was over, it turned out that a lot of these people that used that discount, that used that city pass to purchase a meal for €1, because they get a 80% discount on this €6 meal, that they actually were still in touch with some of the people that they had met through that facility, with some of the home cooks. They actually still use that service. I mean, not every day, because when you're low income, you cannot afford to spend €6 on a meal 7 days a week. But once in a while, they still did that. And a lot of these home cooks said that they were still in touch with people who used that service. And it really improved sort of the cohesion in that neighborhood. And I think that's a nice, was a small project, small example, but I think that's a nice way to illustrate that there are actually a lot of positive indirect effects of this sharing economy that we can use and that we as local governments can stimulate. At the end of the day, it's still our main job to focus on the negative side effects and mitigate them and regulate. But I just wanted to share this example with you to stress that there are positive effects of the sharing economy, and we should try to enhance them. So, thank you.
Carlos Moreno, please.
I have a presentation.
Yes. Now we'll talk Carlos Moreno from Paris.
No.
Yeah, they are going to put the presentation. Sí.
Okay, thank you very much for your invitation. It's a real pleasure to be here to discuss about this crucial topic, sharing cities. I come from Paris. I am the special advisor of smart cities of the Mayor of Paris, Ms. Anne Hidalgo. Today is a very special day in Paris because today is the November 13th. 3 years ago, 130 people died in Paris during the terrorist attacks. In the concert hall, the mythic Bataclan, and in the restaurant, in the terraces, many people has died by this barbarian attack. In reality, city is alive, and the city is the life. 3 years ago, I came here to Barcelona, and I said in this moment, in a Smart City Expo in Barcelona in 2015, the life, joy, and sharing is more strong than death, sadness, and isolationism. When we discuss about sharing cities, we discuss about, before all, life in cities. When this horrible attack in Paris has produced, people occupied the street, the wall, and the motto of the city of Paris, fluctuat nec mergetur. The ship is tossed but not submerged. I think that is a very good definition of the resilience for participative cities. Today, we want to discuss about the future of cities, the future of sharing cities. How can we share the cities? How can Paris become a sharing cities? Of course, Paris is a global city. We live in an interconnected world. We live in an interconnected cities in Europe. Our strategy in Paris about sharing cities is based on 3 pillars. The connected cities, the open cities, and the most important point, the sustainable cities. This is today the crucial element today. 2 weeks ago, the IPCC group has published the special report about 1.5 degrees. And the situation today is very, very serious, because the question for our cities today is how can we survive at the end of this century? How can we survive in 2 decades when we observe everywhere the climate change? We have done much time today to act if we want to fight against climate change. From the Paris Agreement, the COP21, until today, in the city of Paris, our vector, our most important point today is fight against climate change and to preserve democracy. We consider that our cities are seriously threatened by, at the same time, climate change, and the populism is very important today to act to reinventing commons. Commons is today a very important battle for cities. Without commons, it's not possible to develop sustainable cities and connected cities and open cities. The question is, what is the commons? In Paris, we consider that you have 3 crucial elements about commons. The first, the air. The air is very polluted. This is one common element. The water. This is a second common element in cities. The water today is as well very limited in cities. The third element is the shadow, because climate change, the heat waves, shadow become as well a very important common. Air, water, and shadow, 3 important common today in cities. The 21st century is at the same time the century of cities, and at the same time the century of technological disruptions, platforms, artificial intelligence, all kinds of applications. This is the times of massive ubiquity. But if we want to identify 3 new commons today in the 21st century, in the century of massive ubiquity, we have the place. The place in cities is today very limited. The time, we live in the hectic cities, and the silence, because we are in permanence full connected with very many noise, all kind of informations, all kind of data. 3 important commons in cities: air, water, shadow, place, time, silence. This is today in Paris the guideline. How can we reinvent in commons in order to build a low carbon city? How can we develop the new commons, and at the same time we can propose all citizens to involve in this low carbon city? The response for that is to understand citizens, stakeholders, and all kinds of sectors involved in cities, what is our urban metabolism. The urban metabolism is today a very important element if we want to develop a roadmap for cities. Our roadmap is based on fight against climate change, to prioritize the sustainable development, to develop the powerful ecosystem of innovation, to develop a new urban culture, and to develop the resilience in cities. The most important target today in Paris is not the technological disruptions, it's not the new mobilities, it's not the new developments of sensory cities, is how can we improve the quality of life of citizens. For that, since 2002, we have decided to ban diesel cars, or cars, on the bank river of the left bank river. This is Paris Beach, on the period of summer. The Champs-Élysées, the mythical Champs-Élysées Avenue, is a pedestrian street one Sunday per month. And after a very strong battle, 1 week ago, we obtained definitely to ban diesel off the right bank of the Seine River in order to offer of inhabitants of Paris a new urban park, the Rive de Seine Park. This is the very important involvement in order to propose public space for all, to find out biodiversity, find out water in cities, fresh cities, air. In this moment, we have decided to redesign the 7 iconic squares in Paris. The square have designed before essentially for cars, the very big roundabout. Today, we have a very important transformation involved in order to redesign this square mainly for pedestrians and bike and soft mobilities. The digital platforms as Deliveroo and other platforms, the City of Paris have decided to support the cooperative efforts. This is the Coupecycle. Coupecycle, this is a new kind of digital platform based on common license, peer-to-peer, in order to encourage bikers to transform the business model of digital platform as Deliveroo based on very poor conditions for people in the real cooperative to develop the multi-services in cities. This example is today in Paris, Coupecycle, and said to me the last week in Madrid today, Las Pajareras has decided to localize this kind of platform, Coupecycle. Of course, we have a powerful program based on made in Paris. They develop production, develop innovation with incubators, with the startup. We have designed a new district, the District of Innovation, Urban District of Innovation, in the former rail station. This rail station has been transformed in the most important today, the biggest incubator in Europe for startups. And for citizens, for 5 years, we propose each year the participatory budgeting. 5% of the budget of the city of Paris is totally offered to citizens in order to vote about their projects and to encourage their realization. The participatory budgeting is a real successful today, and we have several projects at the heart of Paris of students in the poor districts. Is very impressive today, the success of this project. I finish with la Nuit de la Solidarité. This is the cartography data in order to collect information to identify homeless in cities. This is the program La Nuit de la Solidarité, the Night of Solidarity. And we have built a digital map with the area of the homeless in order to open the town hall in several districts, including the town hall in Paris, to host this winter the homeless in the public building. You have many other projects, Reinventing Paris, Beautiful Paris. This is a very important project with artists and designers to transform Paris. Pariculteur, this is the very powerful project based on urban agriculture, and the Fab City, because we have hosted this summer the Fab City Summit. This is the concrete transformations. The next step is the Olympic Games in 2024, because we have decided to develop the first inclusive, innovative Olympic Games based on circular economy. 20% of all contracts in order to develop the project for Olympic Games will be based on circular economy, social inclusion, and social innovative economy. With the Professor Yunus, in a few minutes the Professor Yunus will be speak. We have decided to work together until 2014 to develop this new kind of Olympic Games, inclusive, innovative, and based on circular economy. Thank you.
Very much.
Okay, I'm back. Okay. Thank you. This is a short presentation for the Milano case. In the first slide, you can see an overview of the city in terms of spread of sharing services. Obviously, Milano is top city in Italy for number of platform economy services and co-working. We did a strong investment in the mobility service in sharing, and the majority of Italian platforms is based in Milano. As I said yesterday in another panel, in 2013, the municipality of Milano launched a public consultation with citizens and stakeholders about sharing economy guidelines. That is a document, an official document proposed by the municipality of Milano. And in 2014, the document, the guideline final version, was approved by the City Council. The document is really coherent with the declaration we have just presented today. And since 2015, we are mapping sharing economy players and operators. You can see the guidelines principles, and you can appreciate that the approach we adopted in Milano was very, very similar to the today declaration. We want to generate shared values and increase collaboration and cooperation, and obviously improve the quality of life in the city. We want to sustain accessible and inclusive platforms and experience in the city. We will support any experience and platform that respect local laws and promote active citizens and help create new networks and social relations in our city. We want to optimize resources and time and enhance common assets. We usually use the same one technology platform, promote open technologies and respect principle of transparency, openness and accountability. And we want to ensure that standards of confidentiality, integrity and availability are up to current technological standards. In coherence with this, the municipality of Milano aims to develop a specific action plan to map, publicize and arrange a system of the most important experiences, promote public debate, training and information on the sharing economy and a culture of collaboration, strengthen the link between collaborative businesses and the experience of active citizenship, promote the creation of new sharing economy enterprises and their interaction with the traditional businesses and in specific small and medium enterprises, as the declaration says, and become an early adopter of sharing economy services and collaborative services, also introducing specific clause in a public competition procedures. And this is a point of particular importance in the administrative action. Finally, I'd like to show you a concrete case we are coping with at the moment. The case is related to the increasing phenomenon of food delivery in the city. Also in the city of Paris is present the same phenomenon, and Barcelona and other cities too. We show an enormous increase of the phenomenon, also in terms of workers involved, a number of platforms operating now in the city. You can appreciate some numbers and details in the slide. And today we are challenging with the compresence of the spread of phenomenon and the workers' right in the city. The question is if this kind of workers are self-employed or are employee, and how they can relation with the algorithm used by the platforms to regulate the time work. And obviously the question of the amount of pay and wages is also very present in the public debate, also in the city of Milano. And there is also a specific issue regarding the citizens or the customers that use this kind of platform, is the question of lack of food hygiene measures or regulation. What the municipality are doing. We set up a negotiating table with delivery platforms to identify some common rules to improve workers' conditions, even in terms of pay, security, and insurance. We opened a few months ago the first rider point, that is an help desk offering information, a tailored training about workplace safety and workers' rights, and demanded a social investigation to collect data about workers' condition and needs. This investigation is carried out by the University of Milano, l'Università degli Studi di Milano. And finally, what cities can do together? Just 1 minute, but I've just finished. And in this case, our opinion and suggestions go in the same direction of the declaration. We think we can collect and share data and information about sharing economy impact on work conditions. We can build an active alliance between local authorities, civil society, trade unions, and the business world to debate priorities and find common solutions. And we can define a common standard of minimum requirements about work conditions. And finally, we can develop coordinated actions like today action towards platforms to achieve respect and common standards. That's all, and thank you very much.
Hey everybody. My name is Tom Llewellyn. I'd like to thank everyone who spoke before me, and thank you, Mayo, for inviting me. I'm from the San Francisco Bay Area, but I'm not a representative of the city of San Francisco. I'd like to just begin by asking everyone just to take a moment and to think about something in your city that is really working. This could be a service, a social club, a church group, some sort of a city policy or initiative, something that's serving the needs of others and yourself, something that fills a need in your communities, something that feels good when you participate in it. And I just want you to hold that thought for a moment, because I'm going to come back to it. For those of you who are not familiar with Shareable, we've been around since 2009. Here we go. Almost a decade, empowering communities to share around the world. And, you know, through that work, we've been fortunate enough to help catalyze the sharing economy and its growth, to see its adoption and proliferation. And back in 2011, we kind of got this call to start looking at the ways that cities can really engage in this work. And so we hosted a one-day conference called Share San Francisco that brought together about 130 different policymakers, nonprofits, and social enterprises to explore one key question, to look at, how can we amplify the city of San Francisco as a platform for sharing? Move away from just looking at digital platforms, but at our physical space. And it was great to hear the emphasis in Paris around the commons, because that's really a root of what we feel like is the base of sharing cities. Because when we think about it, all cities are fundamentally shared enterprises. And so the event was a great success, and it started a chain of reaction in part that has led to this global sharing cities movement. And today there are municipal programs all over the world and thousands of people working on this work in related projects like through publishing, research, and activism. But as the concept began to become a little bit more well received and well adopted, we started to get the call from both policymakers and community organizers alike to kind of go back and look for a deeper definition of sharing cities, to kind of lay out a greater path forward. And this was for a number of reasons. One, because things were happening so fast and there was a need for good policies and models to follow. And two, because there was a fear that the idea of sharing cities was going to be co-opted as the sharing economy was starting to be co-opted around the world. And so we started to kind of work with a group of fellows they pulled from all over the world to kind of dive into this deeper. And through that work, we ended up producing this new book, Sharing Cities, Activating the Urban Commons. Now, I feel like it's really easy to get stuck focusing on the challenges of the day, because there's a lot of them. As we know, there's a triple crisis of sustainability, democracy, and equity. There's billions of city dwellers that have a hard time to meet their basic needs around food and water and shelter. And the stakes are really high. And at the same time, there are so many people that are working on projects and initiatives that are showing that there are ways to move forward. And that there are these community-based initiatives and forward-thinking businesses and city policies, just like the things that you were thinking about that I asked you to think about at the beginning of this talk, that are just crying out to be replicated. And so with that in mind, we collected 137 different case studies and city policies drawn from over 80 cities and 35 countries, which shows the power of sharing and acts as a practical reference guide for community-based solutions to the urgent challenges that we're facing. But the journey to get there took a little bit longer than we'd first anticipated. 3 years ago, I was in Bologna, Italy, and we just followed up an academic conference dedicated to the exploration of the urban commons. We hosted a half-day working group comprised of some of the leading thinkers in the field. And I was really excited because I thought this is the group of people that we're going to bring together, and we're going to come up with that definition for the urban commons, which is then going to help us lead to a definition of sharing cities. It's not really what happened. During the meeting, we had a lot of ideas come out, and we were challenged by Paula Siegel, who's the co-founder of 596 Acres in New York City. And she challenged us to lead with principles rather than a definition or a set of policies, arguing that it's the principles that provide the context for everything else. It's the principles that provide the context for everything else. And after some reflection, we took that to heart, and we rose to that challenge. And when you think about it, there really can be not a single definition of sharing cities. That it's kind of fundamentally against the idea. There's no one-size-fits-all prescription. If anything, cities should kind of hold back against homogeny and support their own unique cultures. Because in a sense, the idea of becoming a sharing city is really aspirational at its core. And so we must aspire to do better, to be better, rather than focusing solely on how to reduce and mitigate the negative effects of digital platforms that they're having on our cities, which is really important. And it's amazing, this declaration that was created. It's a great place to start. But we also need to work towards something more, creating the cities and societies that we want to live in, not only now, but also into the future. Sharing cities should prioritize transformation over transaction. They should emphasize solutions that build residents' ability to work together. Moreover, this emphasis creates space for individuals to develop as human beings. As Desmond Tutu has said, a person is a person through other persons. We need each other to become fully human. Cities should recognize the impact of replication, not just scale. All over the world, we are seeing the proliferation of tool libraries and time banks, fab labs and community gardens. All of these locally based, local serving initiatives are actually more resilient than if they were to be one single corporation. They're not reliant upon that corporation's success or failure. And the service they're able to provide become much more dynamic. George Monbiot says that there is not enough physical or environmental space for everyone to enjoy private luxury, and that magnificent public amenities create more space for everyone at a fraction of the cost. Sharing cities can support both private sufficiency and civic abundance, and can be a path to a deeper celebration of community, not the deprivation and drabness that downscaling consumption often suggests. And sharing cities can assert local control, but with global input. I'm just trying to go quick. We can think about cities creating a shared technology stack. Think Airbnb or Uber, but that are locally controlled and connected globally. It's kind of what the futurist Jose Ramos calls cosmo-localization. It's a strategy to achieve scale while building solidarity. And my final point that I want to make about is that what we should be working towards achieving is solidarity. Sharing cities represent a revived story about cities that recognizes community as the heroic protagonist in the urban transformation. Aristotle, the leading philosopher of Athens' golden age, believed that the city existed for the well-being of the people. The primary function of cities should be to produce residents capable of working together for the common good, the foundational skill that makes all other things possible in society. So I have three challenges: to celebrate and elevate what is already working, to replicate projects and city policies that are proven solutions, and to prioritize the challenges of our time, not just those of convenience and market domination. Because in the end, the solution is us. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tom. If there are questions from, excuse me, I read the questions from here, or do I ask? Okay. So I'm going to point out on the questions that has emerged from the public, the main ones. One question from Rotterdam. Almost all city stakeholders, what should be, almost all city stakeholders, what should be the municipality's role in the sharing cities? It is controllable, guidable, directable by the government? Same, another question also from Rotterdam. How can governments address the changing entities' world roles? For example, the change of bike owners to delivery boy as well, or consumers to produce consumers. Rotterdam.
Well, you have, does this work? Yeah? You have to repeat the question, which also gives me a chance to sort of prepare. Is this a question from Rotterdam?
Yes.
Yeah, it's very, very tricky for me from Amsterdam to answer that any question from Rotterdam. So just repeat the last question.
No, I'm going to interpret the question.
Yeah, you
Okay.
interpret it for me. That's good.
I think the composition of this panel, the element that 3 of you are from a city council, but also there is a presentation about sharing cities which provide like a view that is not like administrative centered, but point about the role of civil society or other actors, no? It's already pointed about the how far today what a sharing city is should be only answered by public administration, referring of it's only the role of municipalities, or should it be injected into all actors into the conversation, considering the bigness of the challenges, no? Milan, for example, has pointed about the process of decision making, trying to involve actors. So I would redirect the question into this one.
Shall I give it a first try and then?
Yes.
I think the role of municipalities, the role of local governments is, what you see is that a lot of these sharing initiatives are not taken by the government. They're not government initiatives. It's actually funny for me to say, because I gave an example in my intervention of sort of an initiative that my local government took, but even that was based on an already existing private initiative. So at the end of the day, I think the role of local governments is not to initiate these sharing initiatives, because that, you know, communities, neighborhoods, the market, they will do that. I think our role is primarily twofold. First of all, to make sure that, or make sure to keep an eye on those people that are not part of those sharing initiatives, like the example that I gave, because there will always people that will be left behind, because a lot of these sharing initiatives are based on digital technologies. Part of our communities don't have the social networks that you need to participate in these sharing initiatives. So our first role is to keep an eye on those people that cannot participate or find it difficult to participate for whatever reason that is. And I think the second role is to regulate, but do that in a smart way. Because regulation is a very delicate thing, and sometimes when you over-regulate, you do more harm than good. So my call would be for local governments and councils, just wait and see first. Whenever you see a sharing initiative or a new company coming into the marketplace, don't be afraid. Just let it develop first a little bit and try to cooperate. Work with these companies. Usually they're parties that you can very well deal with. So keep an eye on people that stay behind, and don't overregulate. Just wait and see, and don't be too afraid of allowing these new market initiatives to blossom. That would be my approach.
And I'll just add real quickly that one of the things that we've seen that's really powerful is when cities give away a certain amount of the power back to their communities. And the policies that we've been collecting over the last number of years demonstrate the ways that community members can participate in the provisioning of core city services and needs. And so it's more than just cities enabling and supporting companies, but also really supporting communities to participate through multi-stakeholder meetings and everything else like that. And that's kind of what we've seen to be the greatest success towards launching a sharing city.
I think that beyond the role of control, of regulation of cities, it's very important in this case of Paris to consider the city as a platform. The city is a platform, the possibility to offer the city in several aspects to develop new experimentations, to promote innovation, to promote disruptions, to promote new services, new model of service, new economic model. For that, it's very important to consider how can we support private initiative. The commons is not only public services. The commons is the possibility to offer new services in order to improve the quality of life of citizens in cities. It's not only the monopolistic situation by public services. It's very important to combine private service with public service, with corps or startups or associations. And if we consider that city is a platform, we should assume this perspective.
Okay.
I believe that in different ways, all of us, local government, are experiencing the power of soft power in regulating this kind of phenomenon. We want to be an actors that regulate and not impose a direction in a top-down approach. So we are nudging this kind of phenomenon in the direction to preserve common goods and general interest.
Okay. Thank you very much for the four of us. Actually, we have finished the time. But it was very beautiful to have you intervening and referring to this question. We are going to have now a coffee break, and after the coffee break we will have the intervention of Juliet Schor and Mark Graham. I encourage you to continue the other activities part of the Inclusive and Sharing Cities topic, and also to visit the stand of the Sharing Cities Summit, which is just close by the Barcelona City Council one. Thank you, everyone. We are, hello? Hello, good morning, good evening, afternoon. Actually, good something to everyone. We are going to start. You are at the thematic program on inclusive and sharing cities. This is part of the program of the Sharing Cities Summit, which aggregate 50 cities for agreeing on a common declaration. And now we have two keynotes in order to reflect from research about the challenges and opportunities of sharing cities and collaborative platform. I would like to give first the floor to Juliet Schor from Boston College, which will provide us insights from her research. She's a worldwide expert and one of the persons who has been doing more empirical work in the field. Thank you, Juliet.
Mayo is oh, here we go. Great. Well, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here, and a really exciting gathering with cities from all over the world talking about sharing. And I'm going to talk to you about some of the research and the challenges that we have seen as we've studied sharing platforms and sharing innovations over the coming years. Now, cities, to my mind, face two very large challenges going forward. The first, we're quite familiar with. Carlos Moreno from Paris talked quite a bit about climate change and the challenge of meeting very, very ambitious reduction targets. The latest report, of course, from the IPCC on what the world has to do to stay within 1.5 degrees of warming it's a huge challenge. We have IPCC reports 12 years to really get going on this, and of course we've been unable to. But that's at the national government level. I think at the city level we're seeing something very different, and it seems clear that cities are really the entities to take the lead on this. They are responsible for large volume of emissions. Of course, large fraction of the world's population are in cities. So any kind of innovation that cities are involved with has to take climate absolutely at the core and has to be central to what the innovation is doing. And then, of course, secondly, inequality. Inequality has been growing in many parts of the world. This is on a global basis, share of global wealth, the richest 1% and the other 99%. So we have a moment of extreme inequality in which the gains of economic activity are going disproportionately to the wealthy. So what about the sharing economy? How does it relate to these two fundamental challenges? So the sharing economy was introduced with claims to solve both issues of climate change and issues of inequality. And so platforms like ride-hailing platforms, Uber, lodging platforms, Airbnb launched with a discourse that said, we're going to reduce carbon footprints. We have lower ecological impact. It was a big part of what attracted people to these platforms in the first place. We began studying these platforms practically as they began. So we talked to the earliest users of the platforms as well as the people earning money on the platforms, and many of them referenced the ecological benefits of what came to be called in 2012 the sharing economy. The platforms also advertise that they provide economic opportunity for everyone, that they have very open access, easy to come onto the platform to earn, that they are supporting the middle class, that they are giving people who don't have opportunities new ways to earn money, and that as a consequence they are reducing wealth and income inequality. They also claim, many of them, to increase social ties, so Airbnb especially, but the ride-hailing platforms in the early days also claimed that they were bringing people together, person-to-person exchange, and of course that they are improving economic efficiency, and I think that is the claim that is most widely accepted. Our research calls all of these into question as automatic features of platforms. In fact, we find quite contrary results in many cases, which is not to say that sharing platforms or sharing innovations can't be changed to solve these problems. I believe they can, which is why I study them. But the idea that these are automatic features of platforms is absolutely wrong. Okay, so just so you know where my claims are coming from, and I see it, we lost a little bit. We began in 2011 formally, so I actually started studying a little bit earlier. This is my team of PhD candidates, and some of them now are PhDs in sociology. We've been funded by the MacArthur Foundation, which is a major foundation in the United States. And we've done a series of cases, beginning with nonprofit sharing initiatives. Our first case was a time bank, multilateral time trading. A food swap, people prepare food and exchange it with each other, non-monetized. We studied a makerspace, which is a community production environment, one of the most largest and successful makerspaces in the United States. And then we began, as the for-profits began to scale, we began studying Airbnb, Turo, which is Airbnb for cars. It's a peer-to-peer car rental. TaskRabbit, which is a generalized gig labor platform. Skillshare, which is open access education. Lyft, which is the smaller ride-hailing company, mostly at the moment I think is just leaving the United States. And then of course Uber, and I always like to say I avoided studying Uber for as long as I could, and eventually it seemed inevitable. And then we added food delivery or delivery courier platforms. We have different platforms than Europe. Deliveroo, Foodora, Uber Eats, etc. We have Uber Eats. We studied Postmates and Favor, which are the two of the dominant ones in Boston, where most of this research took place. And our final case of data collection before the project ended was one of the largest and most successful, and at the time we started, one of the few platform cooperatives in the country and in the world. It's actually in North America, in Canada. It's stock photographers who own the platform that is selling their photos. So let me start with inequality. Does the sharing economy disrupt inequality, as the companies claim? So are they providing income to less privileged residents via new technologies because of the low barriers to entry and open access? And this is an ad from New York City when Airbnb was first being challenged by the city for what it was doing. Pretty quickly, these ads got graffitied, and here, if you can see, it says the shared economy is a lie. So a lot of pushback against Airbnb's claim, and this represents the other side of the debate, which says that Airbnb and other platforms are actually reproducing or intensifying inequality. And we've looked particularly at race and class inequality. Are they expanding opportunities for the privileged while providing sort of less opportunity for lower income and people of color? So we have found in all the studies we've done looking at racial inequality, which is on Airbnb, that in fact the reproducing inequality story is more supported by the evidence. So let me just show you for one set of results which are about overall revenues and hosts who are trying to earn money on Airbnb. How does it differ by race? And what I'm going to do here is from our statistical model, which is from data that has been scraped across 10 major cities in the United States. I think the results are would be fairly similar in terms of the some of the findings, maybe less on race, which is a kind of different dynamics in the United States, but some of our other findings. So we're looking at neighborhoods. So neighborhoods, on the left I have neighborhoods that are the model, they would be all white. What would be predicted if it were an all-white neighborhood versus an all non-white neighborhood, so all other races than white. Now, this is not to say that there are pure white neighborhoods and not. It's just these are the predictions of the model. So the predicted number of listings is that, in general, in the non-white areas, people would like to be on Airbnb. So the point about access and opportunity is the will is there from these non-white residents. So they are more likely to be listing their homes on Airbnb. However, if you look at what happens, they get lower prices, meaning they're able to charge less for their places, and their annual revenue is considerably lower than people who live in white neighborhoods. So there is racial discrimination against hosts. So non-white hosts have poorer outcomes on the platform than white hosts. There have also been studies looking at discrimination in the other direction, which is guests who are trying to book homes in the United States, if they are African American, are much more likely to be turned down by the hosts. So we also find that some of the mechanisms that the platforms and other scholars think will ameliorate racial differences are not working to do so nearly to the extent that people think. So the argument is that these public reputation systems, ratings and reputational data that the platforms are crowdsourcing from users, will mean that people won't discriminate against people on the basis of their race because they'll have lots of good information about them. They'll see they have high ratings. They'll see they have good reviews. And so what economists call statistical discrimination will go away because you'll have true information. Well, it turns out that that's not exactly right. For one thing, if you are a host of color, you are much less likely to never get a review or a rating. No one ever will book your place. So, I mean, plenty of listings go on and never get booked. That's a racially skewed outcome. And if you are a host of color, you are much more likely to have a lower rating than if you are a white host. And this can be very problematic on some of these lodging sites where many guests won't go for listings that don't have perfect ratings. So the ratings and reputation systems are not working as people think they are to eliminate racial bias. We also have research on gentrification, which if people are interested, I can talk to you about afterwards, which shows really important what urban scholars call rent gaps, so differences between short-term rental earnings, what a place can earn in the short term versus the long-term rental market, and how over time that leads to more and more units being taken off, of course. That's a story I think we're all familiar with. So overall, Airbnb seems to be plagued by insider-outsider conflicts, meaning the people who use the platform are pretty happy about it, but the neighborhood, the city, impacts on the housing markets, the people of color who are kind of aced out to a certain extent have much less good outcomes. One last point on inequality that comes overall from the work that we've done. We have more than 320 interviews with people on various sharing platforms. As I say, we've studied these 13 platforms. To my knowledge, it's the largest multi-platform study, in-depth study that exists. One of the things we find is that people in the middle class who have high levels of education through these platforms are doing work that traditionally was done by people with low levels of education. So we're talking about cleaning homes on a platform like TaskRabbit, or if you're an Airbnb host, cleaning homes for guests, what a chambermaid would have done in a hotel, or driving, or putting together furniture. One of the biggest tasks on TaskRabbit is IKEA furniture. So what we find is that because the apps, the platforms came with kind of groovy technology and a very modern look and this whole discourse of common good, that many high-educated people felt a lessening of the stigma associated with this kind of blue-collar and pink-collar work. And so we find in our sample lawyers cleaning people's homes, people with science degrees from MIT, also doing house cleaning or personal organizing, or lots of like very stigmatized work from the past, but that is no longer feeling so stigmatized. And so what's happened, particularly because the sharing economy emerged from the economic recession, the global recession of 2007-8, you had high-educated people moving down the ladder, the occupational ladder, and pushing people below them out. So it had, we argue, that within the bottom 80% of the income distribution, you're getting distribution toward the top of that distribution, and rather than the bottom. So an upward movement within the bottom 80, which is not to ignore the other dimension, of course, which is the fabulous wealth accumulation of the owners and the venture capitalists who own the platforms. And that's a sort of 99.1% story. Okay. What about the environmental or carbon impacts of platforms? Airbnb has made a big push to argue that it is environmentally beneficial. And as 72% of Airbnb guests choose the platform to travel more sustainably. People think that it's sustainable. And the platforms created a discourse of eco-benefits. Here's Tom Friedman. Just think how much better all this is for the environment, for people to be renting their spare bedrooms rather than building another Holiday Inn. And the discourse focused on common sense ideas. Oh, of course Airbnb must be good for the environment because we're producing fewer hotels. We would call this a first round benefit. The public mainly accepted these claims. I did the first nationally representative US survey about the sharing economy, and almost 2/3 of Americans said the sharing economy is good for the environment. But the discourse forgot some very simple economic truths. If you offer a lower cost good than a conventional good, people will buy more of it. And in the case of Airbnb, this means people will travel more. And secondly, if the platforms are really raising incomes, as they claim to be, that means people are going to be producing and spending, consuming more, and that, of course, is raising footprints. So on both ride-sharing and Airbnb, which are the two biggest platforms, and of course the two with the most obvious big ecological impacts, it seems pretty clear that the impacts have been negative in terms of carbon. Studies in the United States on ride-sharing show big increase in vehicles. The promised benefits of people giving up their cars are pretty minimal. And most important, people are taking a lot more trips. They're moving around more. They're moving from walking, cycling, and public transportation onto ride-hail. So all the studies so far are looking pretty negative on the ride-hail, and I know I have to stop. Just 2 more slides. The eco impacts on Airbnb, it's the flying to do the additional traveling is swamping the hotel construction just because flying is so carbon intensive. In our earliest interviews, we found a lot of Airbnb hosts saying, you know, I travel when I rent out my apartment, or now it's so much cheaper to travel, I travel more. And then, of course, increased access to carbon-intensive activities, the distributing income up to higher income households who also have higher carbon footprints. Zipcar was the first car sharing initiative in the United States. I'm friendly with both the founder and the person who rebranded it. What did Zipcar do? It gave cars to people who didn't have access. It gave cars to college students at low prices. It put cars in more places. It upscaled the cars that people would ride in. Their own studies show bad carbon impacts. They no longer advertise that they are reducing carbon impacts. Durable goods borrowing platforms, a big hope of the sharing economy. If people loan out or rent things to each other, they'll buy less, but it turns out that almost all of these have collapsed, and so you're really not getting much big uptake. The only one left of those that are on there is Peerby, and in the United States, it's failing. So let me stop then, sorry for going over time. Sharing economy does have the potential to reduce inequality, but cities are the key actors that need to explicitly address issues of inequality and carbon if you want to get these kinds of effects. You can't think that the platforms just doing whatever they want are actually going to yield lower inequality and lower carbon and eco footprints. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Juliet, on this very robust presentation and give us a lot of elements in order to rethink about the platform economy and what cities can do. Now I would like to give the floor to our second keynote of the day. I am very happy to present you to Mark Graham from the Oxford Internet Institute. Thank you.
How do I pull the slides up? Okay, hi everyone, it's an honor to be here, and thanks very much to the organizers, and especially Mayo, for inviting me here today. What I want to talk about is one particular but important part of the coming togethers of platforms and cities, and that's the human labor that powers all of them. And in my talk, what I'll be doing is drawing on research that I've done over the last few years with some of these collaborators that are listed on the slide here. We spoke to hundreds of platform workers in South Africa, in Nigeria, in Ghana, in Kenya, in Uganda, and then more in Southeast Asia, some of whom were doing what you might think of as geographically tethered platform work, so things like taxi driving or food delivery, some doing what you might think of as cloud work, so this is work that in theory can be done from anywhere, but ends up being done in the cities that we are in. And basically, our research, it made me see a lot of opportunities that the platform economy presents to workers, to consumers and businesses, but it also made me understand what isn't working, what's harmful, what's exploitative. and how these problematic trends are being brought into being almost everywhere we went, in the global north, in the global south. But then most importantly, what we could do differently. And that's where I want to get to with this talk. So what I want to do in the time we have here is start by thinking about some of the key economic, social, political, and technological enablers and constituent parts of the platform economy. And then once we do that, I think it's useful to talk about what's going wrong in the platform economy with regards to the lives of workers, the organization of platforms, the regulation of the sector, and the flow of information to consumers. Once we recognize those issues, and once we recognize that those issues are only one possible way of configuring these constituent parts of the platform economy, I think then we can move to thinking about how we might alter those enablers to bring about fairer outcomes. So to do that, we need to think about potential sources of power, potential sources of leverage. I'm oversimplifying here, but what we'll focus on are the regulators, the workers, the platforms, and the consumers. And then finally, I want to do all of this to show you a new project that I'm starting that fits into some of these ongoing strategies to improve outcomes in the platform economy. So let me start by talking about some of the key enablers in the current platform economy, in which there are about 70 million people worldwide and tens of millions in Europe signed up to find work in. So the first one is technological. We now have over half of the world's population connected to the internet. We have smartphones and laptops in the hands of billions of people. We have global technological standards that allow work to be carved up into fragments and reassembled. And we, of course, have platforms that facilitate the matching of the supply and the demand for labor power. All of this brings into being what you might think of as a planetary labor market for the cloud work that people are doing. Now, an example of just how stretched out some of these digital production networks that exist, an example of that can be seen in this facility that you're looking at on the screen. It's in rural northern Uganda. I went to it last year. It employs hundreds of people to train machine learning systems, machine learning algorithms that are used by things like autonomous cars and shopping recommendation systems. So these are products that these workers actually will probably never end up using. Let me move on though. The second enabler, it's social. So there's a demand amongst businesses, amongst consumers, and amongst workers for flexibility. And this then manifests itself in contracts that define workers as independent freelancers rather than employees of companies. The third enabler, it's economic. On the demand side, there are huge pressures for companies to cut costs to stay competitive, in part because of this increasing planetary market that they're often competing in. On the supply side, there are now huge populations of now connected and underemployed people in low and middle income countries who are actively looking for jobs. The fourth enabler is political. So in the midst of what you might think of as our neoliberal moment, we have weakened employment protections, weakened trade unions, and a deregulated business environment that seeks to shift risk from employers and the state to individual workers. So these factors that I just discussed, they brought about the current world of platform-based work. The jobs that have been created, they provided opportunities and income to millions of people. But what I'm going to talk about instead are four interrelated concerns. Lack of accountability for platforms, lack of structural power amongst workers, rent-seeking platforms, and the opacity of production networks for consumers, and how these concerns manifest into poorer job quality for workers. So let me start with the first one of these, lack of accountability for platforms. And here what I'm talking about is how platforms can use their global reach to shirk any local responsibility. So in South Africa, let me give you an example. In South Africa, a case was brought against Uber, arguing that its drivers who had been quote-unquote deactivated, that they should be considered employees and have the protections that are afforded to employees under South African law. But the judge in that case determined that they weren't employees of Uber South Africa, not because they weren't working for Uber South Africa, but simply because Uber South Africa operates under license from an umbrella Uber company that's based in the Netherlands. So the South African workers would have to take up their case with a Dutch court if they wanted to be heard. So the second concern is the lack of structural power amongst workers. Why do we have this absence of structural power amongst workers? Well, it's in part because of an enormous, huge oversupply of labor power. So this is data from Upwork.com, one of the world's largest crowdworking platforms. The platform has about 2 million active workers registered on the site to find work, but actually less than 100,000 active jobs. So if you look at this chart here, you can see that in most countries there are way more people looking for work than people who ever find work on the platform. Not only do we have an oversupply of labor power, but we also have a significant spatial fragmentation of that work. So this slide, it shows you the geographic spread of where workers are in some of the world's largest online outsourcing platforms. So you get workers in rich countries and workers in poor countries all competing in the same market. So if you have this massive oversupply of labor power and huge geographic spread of both jobs and workers, with workers who see themselves as competitors rather than collaborators, combined with an absence of regulation, you're going to get a race to the bottom in terms of wages and working conditions. You'll get lots of stories like this one on the slide from workers who feel quite powerless to negotiate conditions and rates for their labor. And because of that, a lot of workers spend a huge amount of unpaid time just looking for jobs every week. So according to a survey that we did, it's an average of 18 hours a week that people spend looking for work. Non-payment and withholding of wages, it's also an extremely common phenomenon in the platform economy. You see here that it's almost encouraged by some platforms in the wording on their websites. In a survey we did, 57% of workers told us they lose sleep as a result of the work that they do. And from speaking to workers on the ground, this was a very common story. So I remember a few interviews that I did in a row in Ghana where workers told me that they stayed up for multiple days straight to do work because when they had jobs, they wanted to complete them on time and they never knew when the next job would come in. So workers are basically free to work when they want, but they aren't freed from the need to work long hours to make a living. Going hand in hand with precarity and job insecurity is vulnerability. So people having no choice but to do work that's given to them. And in our research, we did hear cases of workers transcending local labor market discrimination, but there were equally examples of exclusion being explicitly or more subtly expressed. So what you see here on the slide is one of the more obvious ones, where a client tells workers from South Asia to not even bother bidding on a job. So let me move to the third concern. It's the one about platforms, so specifically their rent-seeking nature. Power in the platform economy often lies not with those who own the means of production, like in traditional industries, but with those who own the means of distribution or the means of computation, like the platforms. So platforms extract rents from every transaction, and these fees can range from 20% of every transaction for Upwork workers to up to 30% for Uber drivers or riders. So for workers who are scraping by, these amounts are not insignificant. And then finally, opacity. So a lot of the worst issues that we see in the platform economy, a lot of the worst issues we see in platform labor, they arise because of the opacity of and the fragmentation in production networks that all of us are embedded into. So most clients or most consumers likely have no idea what if you're engaging in crowd work, what a minimum wage is or what a living wage is in the country that you're outsourcing a job to. If you order something with an app or a website, you don't know if your actions are harming someone on the other side of that screen. So even workers themselves actually often have little idea who they're working for sometimes or what the purpose or intent of their work is. So the workers that I met who were training autonomous vehicles, they were always told not that their job was training driverless cars, but their job was image tagging. So how do you begin as a worker to push for changes in working conditions or, God forbid, ask for a fair share of the value that you're creating if you don't know anything about why you're doing what you're doing or how it's going to be used? So the point of all of this is to say that although platforms, they've undoubtedly helped a lot of people find work and income and autonomy and flexibility that they just would not have had otherwise, the enablers and the issues that bring about today's platform economy mean that what we have right now is neither desirable nor inevitable. But what do some alternate futures for some of these concerns in the platform economy look like? Well, first of all, I think we could have a future with more effective scalar or spatial accountability. So what I mean by that is platforms should be accountable to workers in their home jurisdictions. We shouldn't have cases where Uber drivers in South Africa can't use local courts. Even more importantly, we need to make sure that platforms are accountable somewhere rather than nowhere. But failing to do any of that, I think what we can do, because of what we know about the economic and the regulatory geographies of this work, is step up our efforts in what we could think of as regulatory bottlenecks. So the very concentrated set of locations in which clients live and the places in which these firms base themselves. So regulators in those places have transnational power to ensure that platform work is carried out in socially desirable ways. Second, we need more effective horizontal collaboration that will lead to greater structural power of workers. So I asked all of the workers that I spoke to if they were in a trade union, and when I did that, they almost always laughed. Because they know very clearly that if they withdraw their labor, then workers elsewhere are going to quickly replace them. Now, traditional trade unions, they obviously rely on proximity to build a sense of mutuality amongst workers. Place matters to them. And when you look at geographically tethered platform work, so things like taxi driving or house cleaning or food delivery, there have been some successes by workers, platform workers collectively organizing. But for cloud workers, there's almost nothing like this. And if workers always see themselves as competitors rather than collaborators, they'll always collectively be in a weak position. So in addition to workers organizing, we can also think about more democratic modes of platform governance, and specifically look to the ways in which workers have been taking control of the means of production and distribution through platform cooperatives that we've talked about a bit in these sessions today. So, in other words, replacing existing services with platforms that are more democratically owned and governed. But in the absence of any of these strategies that I just spoke about being put into practice, there's one more pro-worker strategy that I think we can talk about, and that's more transparency in production networks. So, with some support from the German Federal Ministry for Economic Cooperation and Development, what some colleagues and I are launching is what we call a Fair Work Foundation. So, we're basically putting together an independent monitoring and scoring system so that we can see who the better and who the worst platforms are. And this is basically a way of influencing consumers and influencing clients, who in turn then can exert influence on the ways in which the platform economy is run. So let me tell you just a bit about how we're doing this. We started out with a collaboration with the International Labour Organization in Geneva. We brought together platforms, workers, unions, and academics to talk about ways of setting key global fair work principles for the gig economy. And from that, we developed 5 core principles that we think should apply to all platform work. And then we then worked to develop ways of measuring those principles in order to give each platform a score out of 10. And you can see the 5 principles and the 10 scores on the slide here. So each principle has a basic score and then a bonus score if the first one is achieved. And if you can't read them from where you're sitting, they're all on our website. Our website's very easy to remember. It's just fair.work for anyone who's interested in reading more about them. But let me quickly tell you what they are. So we're talking about fair pay. This means paying at least a minimum wage in the worker's jurisdiction. Fair conditions, so protecting worker health and well-being. Fair contracts, so this means at a minimum following national labor law, having a clear contract, but also not engaging in the misclassification of workers. Fair governance, this means having an appeals process for disciplinary procedures, policies that ensure equality in the ways workers are managed, and also informing workers about the data that's being collected about them. And then finally, fair representation. So this means having a process through which worker voice can be expressed, and then recognizing collective bodies like unions where they exist. Now, we don't think any platform will achieve all of these things, but by producing this annual ranking, annual league table in each country, we'll see who's better and who's worse. If you get a high score, you're probably doing well. If you get a low score, we probably want to avoid you. We're piloting this in South Africa, and there's already been one case where a platform is willing to change some of their policies with regards to how they treat their workers in order to get a higher score. What we want to do next is try to pilot this in Europe. We think there's a lot of potential for this in Europe, especially because of not just the size of the platform economy here, but also because of the high levels of ethical consumer awareness. So to do that, we're looking for partners who are either interested in working with us or supporting with us. If you have any ideas on how we might do our first pilot in Europe, please come and speak to me after this session. So just to sum all of this up, I wanted to start by talking about some of the key enablers of the platform economy. And doing that then allows us to think about some of the concerns that those enablers bring about. What we have now in the platform economy, it's not any sort of optimal end state, and nor is it inevitable. And I think that's why it's useful to think about some of these alternate platform economies that we might work towards. Now, in the absence of effective regulation, in the absence of strong trade unions, and in the absence of workers owning some of the means of production and distribution, and I should stress that I think we need all of those things, some of my colleagues and I, we think that transparency and consumer pressure can be an effective strategy to pressure platforms to improve working conditions. So we're trying to create the right social, the right economic, the right political and technological conditions to do that, and hopefully doing that can move us away somewhat from our current race to the bottom. Thank you very much.
Hola? Could you hear me? Okay. Thank you very much, Mark, for the presentation. We have some time for questions and debate. There are questions from the audience, both to... Yeah?
Hi. I have a question about the workers and collaborative platform. We are not, or they are not workers. You are a worker if you are an employee. But in this kind of a structure and collaborative, you are like a partner and you decide if you want to be involved with that company or not. You are not a worker.
Shall I respond? Thanks. Well, I mean, I think they are workers. They're doing work. They're being paid for that work. Is this on? This is. Okay. So they're being paid for the work they're doing. They are self-employed by definition in the law, but there's a lot of misclassification that happens in this sector, right? So there's been courts all around the world, throughout Europe, in North America, in Africa, in Asia, in Latin America. Courts are increasingly ruling that this is bogus self-employment for a lot of these workers. This is a misclassification of workers. So I think it's a bit misguided to just say, well, they're not classified as workers, therefore they're not workers. Well, they're human beings who are working, and if we have human beings who are working for less than minimum wages in the places that they're living in, surely that's a problem. If we have people who are working under conditions where they're up for 2 days straight, or they're not being paid for the work they're doing, they're working in dangerous conditions, we shouldn't just say, well, they're self-employed, therefore that's fine. It's their own risk, it's their own responsibility. What we have now in the platform economy, it's just there's this drive to put ever more, take the risk away from companies, take the risk away from the state and put it all on the backs of workers, whether they're self-employed workers or employed workers. Well, it doesn't need to be that way, right? There are people who are working, and whether they're classified as self-employed or not self-employed, I think we need to recognize that they deserve at least minimum wages in the places that they're living in. They deserve at least a minimum set of rights because of the work that they're doing for other people and for other companies.
Hello. I like your score system about the performance of the framework, but how would you use the resolve the system to improve the performance of the company? For example, like, do you have an association to monitor, or will you give some rewards or awards to the companies who performs good, or something like that?
Thanks. So the idea is we started out thinking we would just have a certification scheme, a bit like the Fair Trade Foundation, and we'd give a stamp of approval to platforms that achieve minimum standards. We quickly realized that we wouldn't be giving many certifications out if we did that. So that's why we set up a league table approach, where the idea is every year we'll update the rankings. So every year there'll be a new set of rankings. We also want to make sure that these principles that we have, they're co-created with workers and with platforms. And because of the way in which the platform economy is evolving so quickly, we want to make sure that we allow these principles to evolve every year. We don't want them to remain static, so every year we'll allow the principles to evolve, but also the ratings to evolve. At the moment, we're going to go live with the first league table, the one I showed you a snippet of in South Africa in early 2019. And then our plan is to launch in some other cities in late 2019. Yeah.
If you have a question, go to the mic.
Yeah. Thank you. University Sweden. I have a question to Juliet. With regards to your research, obviously you studied lots of platforms, and you talked about that the benefits are still there, the possibility to leverage the benefits in environmental and social areas. But in your opinion, which platforms do you think are more promising to leverage these benefits? Is it about the platform, or is it about the business model, the values that they hold, or more kind of ecosystem collaborations by other actors? What are the kind of the factors that would help us get out the best out of the sharing economy and avoid the externalities? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. That's a great question. I mean, I think it's both, in the sense that there are certain sectors where if we're thinking, for example, about carbon impacts, it's going to be a lot harder to have positive impacts. But you also have in sectors where you have multiple platforms. So for example, in ride hailing, Uber and Lyft, Lyft has been much better in responding to issues of workers' problems, and all along they've had a much better discourse. And I mean, it's a marginal difference, but there's definitely a difference there. I would say Airbnb is more, there's a mixed behavior there, because on the one hand, Airbnb remains pretty strongly tethered to its discourse of common good. So that means you can call it out on its contradictions more. It also has some other features that are positive in the sense of the fees that it takes are much lower than some of the more predatory platforms like Uber. So it's a mixed bag, I would say. And you know, one interesting thing is thinking about the difference between the digital labor, the cloud work, and the so-called sharing economy work, where it's, you know, so much of it is being done offline, is that we see in our research many more people who are doing this as supplemental earners. So very different than you would get in a poor country like India or South Africa, where you're going to have a much larger fraction who are doing it much more as a primary income source. And also there you get kind of different outcomes. So that's a whole other dimension that's really key. Within the same platform, you have, on some of them, you have very high diversity in terms of how workers are relating to the platform. And we find that matters a lot in terms of their satisfaction, their wages, working conditions, and so forth.
Eugenio from Politecnico di Milano, Italy. A question for both of you. you said that it's very hard to get data from these platforms. Do you think that a stronger role by cities, like through the alliance and through global efforts, might help to put pressure on these platforms to get more transparent data? Thank you.
Thanks. Do you want to go first?
Either way.
I'll just say something quick.
Yeah.
So thanks for the question. I think it's a very good question, and I think it's absolutely something we should be doing. You know, it should be a condition of operating in a city. If a company like Uber is gathering that volume of transport data that they're gathering, why shouldn't we harness it to make our cities more livable and to make our roads better designed and our traffic systems better designed? So we should be pushing for that everywhere.
Yeah, I think we're already seeing some moves in that direction. I mean, yesterday we had representatives of cities talking about their successes in getting some of the companies to give data. They're really on the defensive about this, and just, you know, I've seen over the years I've been studying this, even some of the worst offenders are starting to be more open to collaboration. I agree, it's absolutely central, and it's key to regulation, because the whole regulatory apparatus for these platforms has to come through the data. It can't be inspectors knocking on doors and so forth. It's all there in the data. And the last point on this is, I also think that the getting the carbon impacts under control.
Don't you think there will be a kind of pressure that could be put on those who are giving, you know, through this round, how do you say that in English? Round table, tour de table. Help me. When you are leveraging money, raising money, when you are raising money, don't you think that there could be also influence from your stamp of fair work? Because you can buy a company or take a share or give your money to a company that the day after can have no value because of bad reputation.
Thanks for the question. So if I'm understanding correctly, are you saying that a ranking score would have particular leverage for companies that are transitioning from one state to another? If so, absolutely, and it's a really good point. And we've actually seen this with some of the platforms we've been speaking to in South Africa. One of them very explicitly told us this. They said that we're moving to, we want to be bought by a much bigger, I won't name the company, but they want to be bought by a much bigger company. And one of the things they want to make sure that happens before they do that is they get a better score. And they want a really obvious way of communicating to the outside world that we're not one of these terrible platforms, we're behaving more ethically. And so that's why they're working with us.
It was the other way around, is to make some awareness through the venture capitalists so that this exists and that they should go and ask for the ratio and the mark.
Just one point on this, which is that in some of these sectors, you've already got near monopoly positions with large platforms that are unlikely to be purchased. You know, they all seem to be, you know, there's a big tendency to monopoly with where you have networks, and you know, we've seen that already in a number of sectors. Not everywhere, but. It means that process where you have smaller ones that are going to be bought up is not going to be happening everywhere.
If I could just say one more thing to this, even in it's a good point about the monopolies in certain sectors or subsectors. One reason why we want to use the same principles across sectors, and this is proving somewhat challenging, but we think we can make it work with the current setup. One reason why we want to use those principles across different sectors is because we can look for best practices that work in particular areas, and we can say to platforms who are often in monopoly positions, it's not good enough just to say, well, that's not, no, you could never think of doing this thing, or you could never dream of doing that thing, it would break our model. If we see enough good practices in different subsectors, we can point to them, and we can, in a very verified way, say, look at these guys over here who are doing it well.
Thank you very much both to Juliet and Graham. I'm Mark Graham. Thank you for you attending. We are at the end of the thematic program. I just want to make a short sum up of and also connecting this second part of the program with the first one, in which we have been following presentations from 3 city councils from Paris, Amsterdam, and Milan, and also from Shareable. No, the first element that I would point about is how far this research connect very much with the type of necessities that cities point at and the type of role can have in this ambit. In the sense, on the one hand, the importance of the accessibility of data. I want to make present that yesterday in the Sharing City Summit, an encounter of 50 cities, it was present the initiation of collaboration between cities in order to request data to the platforms. There is already actually 13 cities which has lobbied together the European Commission to make sure that collaborative platforms provide data to the cities, because without the data, as Juliet has said, it's not possible to know about the impact or actual the activity. So the element of syndicating cities and all together requesting this data in front of the platforms or lobbying other institutions in order to make sure that the regulation favor this, it's something that connect both fields, the field of research and the field of policy. Research bringing all the analytical capacity in order to provide analysis of the data regarding the platform and the impact it has, as Juliet has presented. Another element that I would highlight and would connect the previous session with this session, it refers to the work of Mark regarding these criteria for defining qualities of working platforms. And this is very, very important for cities, because cities can not only regulate in the sense of restricting certain operation in certain neighborhoods because it generates gentrification, or regulating regarding the access to data, but cities has other power, which is promote. And in the part of promotion, many times, or something that was very present in the discourse of this morning, but also yesterday with these 15 cities, the element is that cities lack resources and criteria to differentiate in an operative manner, like tools that allow them to differentiate which are the platforms which are not being socially responsible, or not having respecting the labor rights, or not being responsible in respect to the environmental impact they generate, and in this, research can provide, and this is a very concrete example in which research can provide tools for the city councils in order to decide, for example, which funding to give, or which type of promotion of entrepreneurship. No, Barcelona is the first city to host in an entrepreneurship program called La Comunificadora worldwide, and it has been using and I think it would be very interesting to integrate what you have presented, because it has been using about a specific kind of criteria in order to say, okay, we are going to support these platforms, and we are not going to support these ones. And this is something as real as, actually, I am going to end up inviting you to come to the sharing stand, which is a stand part of the expo. It's the first year that we have a sharing stand. It's part of the Sharing City Summit. It's just close the Barcelona City Council stand. And in this stand, there is 80 platforms that are exposing, and there is going to be a program the 3 days. And the selection of these 3 platforms, it was based on trying to define criteria for differentiating on positive platforms, and and it's important because not necessarily for saying which are the good and which are the bad only, but also for differentiate it. It's not the same one type of platform that is not injecting a participative governance, is not having a fair working conditions or a fair economic model, is not based on open data or open software, or are very irresponsible from the type of impact is generate, or is not inclusive as the work of Juliet has pointed out, no? So it's very different, like the type of platforms that follow these criteria than those which are not, and you have also to treat them differently, no? So with this and with the invitation to visit the stand, get to know positive platforms, and also coming for the following years in the topic of inclusion and sharing city, there is going to be one other thematic planet on gentrification, another on collaborative policy, and another one on circular economy, and finally one on economical ecosystems. So I hope to see you during these 3 days, and I thank you very much our keynotes, and I encourage them to keep doing good work, and research is an essential part of this conversation. Thank you, everyone.